and the legend Bruce Posner. What'd you see out there today? Step to him.
Oh, what a play by Luke!
The Big Dog Postgame Show is brought to you by Viener X Consulting. We make your company work. And by Rick Jacklich, the big dog himself, at the Jacklich Law Group. Welcome in to our finals preview. Depending on when you're watching this, tomorrow, or if you're watching the morning later today, 1 o'clock, Maryland, Cornell. Cornell's a higher seed. They get to wear white. Not sure what Maryland's going to wear today, but it's not going to be the white jerseys. A lot of people who have already heard our predictions, I think we've all picked Maryland, are saying, hey, Cornell's the favored team, up by 1.5 goals. And I think we should give that some consideration. But I'm going to let the legend, Bruce Posner, go. First, I'm Wayne Viener. That's Tony Wheeler. Bruce, take it away.
I'm going to tell you why we're going to win this game. And I know that Cornell's a great team. They're 14-1. Basically had a schedule as compared to the Terrapins that was a ridiculous joke. All right, when you compare the quality of what they played and who they played, and Maryland took on everybody. They beat 7 teams in the top 10, Tony, is that correct? They've taken on all comers, and the only teams they lost to were Big Ten teams. That's my theory here. Now, look, I know the face-off guy from Cornell is supposed to be great. Every time that we have to face that situation in the past decade, tell me the last time we got thoroughly dominated at the X. And then tell me how many in the championship game. Tell me how many times we thoroughly dominated at the X and didn't win. All right. Believe me, my answers are correct. Look at last year. Weirman had 17 out of 24. All right. And Notre Dame destroyed us. The X is important. It's crucial. It's not going to stop Maryland. All right. Loose balls. Everything else is going to stop Maryland. Look at the defense of the two teams. C.J. Kirst is the best player on the field, but is something wrong with his hand? I mean, are something wrong with him, Tony? I mean, I don't know. I think there's a lot of question marks, and they all lead to Maryland's way. And finally, the 2-day thing, I think this will have the least effect of a 2-day turnaround since we've been in this position. All right, the very least effect. Why? Because it's cold. They didn't overwork themselves on Saturday in the ridiculous blowout of Syracuse. Tillman took it easy in the fourth quarter. He used shorties left and right, bringing them in and out to keep everybody fresh. And how could you get overly tired when you win a game by so much and dominated like we dominated Cuse like we got dominated last year? It's completely different. The only thing is we don't have Tillman preparing for a week. You know, they said it on TV that if Tillman had a week, instead of being 2-6, they feel we'd be 5-3 in the championship game.
I want to give a little different perspective on that 2-day turnaround, and then Wayne, I'll also talk about why I think Cornell, why in some people's eyes Cornell might be a favorite, right? Cascading at the X, that really, really good offense that they have. Bruce is right, though, on the defensive end and in goal, Cornell's seriously lacking, especially compared to Maryland. But I want to talk about that 2-day turnaround thing. In a lot of ways, Maryland gets punished for their success. And what I mean by that is if you were to look at the 8 appearances that Maryland's made under John Tillman, what you'll see is that Maryland was a substantial underdog in 4 of those 8. His first 2, they're unseeded. No one expected them to make the tournament, let alone make the final. 2015, they're a 7 seed. And then last year, the 2014, we all saw what happened with that 2014. No one was beating Notre Dame, right? So 4 of those 8 that Tillman's lost on the quote-unquote 2-day turnaround after the second time slot, there could be an issue around preparation, right? Tillman likes to prepare, game plan, get everyone ready. But I think 4 of those losses are simply because Maryland didn't have the better team, right? That at some point, when you got better horses, they're going to win the race. If you look at the other 4 that they've played, I hate bringing up 2016 because I have post-traumatic stress from 2016.
All of us do, Tony.
That's the one that got away, right? Maryland's the 1 seed, UNC is unseeded, they make a run. The UVA 21 game, look, we could probably have a real healthy discussion about what really happened. Did Maryland underperform relative to what we think? That one's a question, right? So 2016, 2021, Maryland loses games, one of them to UNC that they probably, they were up 2 with 4 minutes left in the game. You think that's a game they should win. We saw that 21 game. It was a phenomenal game. Maryland had to kick and close at the end, but then Maryland's also won two. So in some ways, I think this kind of Maryland's 2-6 under Tillman and in the championship, and they can't turn it around quickly. Well, 4 of those games, they were like multi-goal underdogs. They shouldn't have even been there.
Well, going back to that Virginia game in 2011, if you remember, Tony, I'm sure you do. I can't remember the player's name, but one of Virginia's top players was suspended. They had all kinds of personnel problems in that year. What happened? It was 103 degrees in Baltimore on Saturday. Maryland played Duke. They couldn't breathe after the game. All right. They come back on Monday, and Virginia's guy, who didn't play because he was suspended, scores 5 goals. Yep. And don't question me on the number of goals, because I remember it like it was yesterday. Yep. He scored 5 goals. He was the only fresh guy on the field, including, Jay Carlson and all of Maryland's studs and Steele Stanwyck. This was the only guy who wasn't dying from playing 2 games in 3 days. And it goes on and on and on. But I think that you make a good point. I don't know if we were ever multi-goal favorites because, number one, there was never really spreads on these games. But against Denver, we were definitely underdog. Against Loyola, we might not have been underdog, but we should have been, okay?
Because we were underdogs.
They were phenomenal.
They
okay?
were.
Well, we rated over them, okay? We were a higher rating than Loyola.
I don't think so, Bruce.
I do. But anyway, they were better. They won 10-3. You win 10-3, you're better. All right, it's that simple. But this year is different. It really is different because what I was talking to you about, Wayne, with the weather and with the fact that Tillman got to rest everybody and the team is so calm, so defensive oriented, so team oriented. And I just think I go back to the last Cornell game when we played them. And yeah, we had arguably the greatest team of all time. But our defense is better this year than that team. Okay? But the key ingredient is numero uno. Okay? Because he was unbelievable on Saturday, like he was on that Saturday against Princeton in 22. And he'll be unbelievable tomorrow against the goalie who has had those kind of numbers. And we were destroying Cornell before we ran out of gas in Hartford. Why? It was 100 degrees each day. And for whatever reason, Tillman came out before the game and put the guy through all kinds of crazy drills, just like a normal day.
But it was also the rain game, Bruce. That was also the thunderstorm delay from Saturday night. That was that game.
30 some odd hours. I mean, this is a 42-hour turnaround from when we left that press conference at 6:00. They had 42 hours to come back for Monday. The game a couple of years ago, my goodness, that game started 3 hours later. It was Maryland won the game anyhow on Monday, but that was an odd circumstance.
We handled Cornell that day like you can't imagine. It was not a game. Yeah, they closed at the end because we were exhausted. And they still couldn't win. And they never had the ball to tie us. They never had the ball to, at the very end of the game, they had the ball to get within 2 goals with 30 seconds left. All right. And they didn't have the ball because Luke won the face-off.
Right.
Yeah, Tony, the face-offs could be the issue. But even if we lose the face-offs, we're better on ground balls. We're better at close polls. We're better across the board on defense. And I think, and you throw into the fact, something's wrong with Kirst. I don't know what it is, but Tony, have you heard the rumors about any injury?
I have, and Mason and I and Wayne, we were talking about it. He looks like he's laboring. It looks like one of his legs is injured. There are also rumors that he's got an upper body issue that he's been dealing with for a couple weeks that have gotten worse. the beating he took, and that's something else to consider. Of the two semifinal games we've seen, Maryland definitely had the easier game. That Cornell Penn State game, Kirst was taking a beating that entire game. If he is injured, whether it's a leg injury or an upper body injury, that game on Saturday did not help.
No, but of course Spanos got hit real hard too. He was near concussed, I think, on that one play, and then he had that leg injury that Wayne thinks might be a hammy problem. We don't really know what it is, but that would be problematic for us too. But I want to tell you something: we've won games without Spanos, and Cornell proved that they could win without Kirst. That means they beat Penn State, and Kirst was a non-entity. So these are teams. These are clearly number one and number two in the country. All right. And I go back, Tony and Wayne, you can give me your opinion on this. 3 teams beat us this year, and that's Michigan and Rutgers and Penn and Ohio State. Why did they beat us? Because they're familiar with us. They know what we do because of the Big Ten, and we play them so much. Cornell's not going to know what hit them tomorrow. I really believe that. And they're a great team. They're not going to know what hit them tomorrow. This reminds me a lot of 17, when maybe it was a pretty close game because we had split with Ohio State that year. We lost the regular season, beat them in the tournament. But let me say this. When you see Maryland for the first time and you haven't played them, and now it's been 4 years, and even if you see them a lot like Syracuse does, they're not easy to play. And bottom line is this, okay? You tell me why, okay, our record outside of the conference was what, Tony? Do you know what it was? What it is?
Undefeated.
Undefeated. We're talking 9, 10, 11, 12, and 0 outside of the conference. That is not an accident. We're going to win this. We're going to win this game tomorrow, and we'll be celebrating in midfield, and they'll be in the dog pile, and we'll be celebrating the greatest goalie who ever played for Maryland. And I know Nico Amato. I mean, I love the guy. I thought that maybe he was. Everybody thinks maybe he was Brian Doherty. Maryland's had a lot of great goalies. Nobody has ever been in 4 straight championship games. He's gotten the number one moniker. He's nurtured it. He's proved it. He proves how it works. We're on our way to the title.
The Big Dog Postgame Show is brought to you by the Big Dog himself, Rick Jacklich at the Jacklich Law Group, and by Viener X Consulting. If you need internet, don't pay the rack rate, pay the insider rate with Viener X.
I'm done.
That's a good 10 minutes there. So back to what Tony and I spoke about before. I'll let Tony refute my point, and then Bruce get a shot at it. Maryland's gritty style of play is really hard to replicate 2 to 3 days later because the absolute amount of defensive effort they put out, the Terps are set up to try and get where you're going to go before you get there. And no matter what level of, if you're talking basketball, hockey, or lacrosse, the amount of effort that's got to be put out 40 some odd hours later is extreme. And it's just hard to do again. And when you say that Cornell has possibly the top 6 guys who walk out on that field offensively, it's going to be another big challenge. I hope Schaller, Burlace, Canfield, and the rest of those guys are up to it. But that's a tall task. Tony, what's your take on that?
It is, but it's also the way Maryland plays. It's the way they're conditioned. It's what they do. I don't think Maryland gets any more or less fatigued than any other team. I don't think it's any easier or any more difficult for another team to come back. Look what Cornell just went through against Penn State was a real slugfest. It's not going to be easy for those guys to turn around either. and try to do what they did, especially if they've got some injuries. Their midfield on defense is not especially deep, not especially big. That's why the possession game is going to be so important to see if Maryland can kind of grind them down. I'm not sure that Maryland's quote unquote lack of success for being so successful um, is a function so much a physical issue. I'm maybe there's something to the whole preparation that Tillman doesn't have time to really develop a game plan to find a weakness. Something we had talked about earlier before the Syracuse game. You could hear the ESPN chatterbox guys going on and on and on about Syracuse is a terrible clearing team, but Maryland doesn't ride. They just get back and they get back on defense and they just set up and grind. I happened to see Maryland practice on Thursday before they came up, and Coach Tillman spent 10 minutes going over a very specific ride scheme to trap Syracuse players in a specific spot, led to three failed clears, right? So you lose that kind of preparation, those kinds of possessions around the margins. I think that's a valid critique of maybe why Maryland hasn't performed well on a short turn. But again, in a lot of these games, they did not have the talent of the other teams in some of these other games, right? And so the preparation then becomes even more important for someone like Coach Tillman to find a way to negate those advantages. I'm not super sure that the talent advantage, a lot of people online are saying Cornell is the more talented team, clearly. You can maybe make an argument that their top six on offense is more talented than Maryland's top six on offense. I'm not super sure I'd go that far, but when you flip the whole field and look at top to bottom of a roster, Maryland's roster is clearly talented.
All right, Bruce, what was your score pick before we started here? Because I'm sure it's still the same.
13-8. Okay.
Tony, what did you have?
I picked the same score for 7 games. All right.
I got 11-9 Maryland. I got 11-9 Terps.
And I went with the classic 9-6 Maryland.
That might be the right number, to tell you the truth.
Has the line moved at all since yesterday, since the last time we looked?
Listen, these games are not massively bet. Okay, they really aren't. I mean, they just, there's a line. I think there's main lines are on, I don't even know which channel, but they're not classically bet. But yeah, should Cornell be a favorite? I guess. But let me tell you all, this is not the Kavanaugh brothers. This is not Liam Entenmann. This is not Jake Taylor. This is not what we faced last year. This is different. And last year we got off to a 2-zip lead in 2 minutes. If anybody thinks that we're not going to be ready for this game, or we're not going to come out of the locker room fighting and charging and being rough and being tough, look at how everybody played the last game. Look at AJ Larkin. Okay, I mean, unless Syracuse is a total fraud, and according to Syracuse fans, they're already the season favorite to win it all next year. All right. Mm-hmm. Even though they lose Owen Hiltz and they lose John Mullen, I mean, they're favored. But
now Mullen's back. Mullen's back next year. He's only a sophomore.
He's a horse, man. He is a horse.
I made this like huge bold prediction a couple weeks ago that we were going to see Maryland's offense have a big renaissance, and everyone's like, "Oh, Maryland's offense is terrible." Well, in the Big Ten, every offense beats the snot out of every game is like such a slugfest that no offense can do anything in conference. If you were to look at Maryland's conference, in conference and out of conference splits on offense, defense, face-off, and goaltending, the main categories, Maryland's offense is 4 to 5 points more efficient out of conference than it is in conference. But what's really scary for opponents is Maryland's defense out of conference is actually better than it is in conference, right? So out of conference, Maryland gets more breathing room to do what they do. Their offense is better, their defense is better, and these other teams out of conference will let Maryland run. Look what happened when Syracuse let Maryland run. Maryland obliterated Syracuse at their own game. Cornell likes to run. They want to get up and back. Maryland's not going to let Cornell get a lot of transition opportunities. If Cornell gives up transition opportunities, we're going to see a replay of what happened in Syracuse.
And with that...
Wait a minute, Wayne. One more point, if you're going to wrap. Fourth quarter, okay? in most of Maryland's games, the game's over. And in most of Maryland, almost all of Maryland's games, Tillman calls off the dogs. Number one, he doesn't want to embarrass the other team. He doesn't want to embarrass his coaching friends. And you're not going to sit there and tell me, either of you, that Maryland couldn't have laid a 20 on Syracuse if they wanted to.
I was actually surprised that he let anybody shoot. When Larkin shot and then Ward shot, I was like, boy, that's...
Larkin shot because he was mad over the hit.
Yeah.
Over
and
the
I
late
think
hit.
Tillman might have been a little mad
Tillman
himself,
said,
but
do
anyhow.
It. And Luka Ward shot because he never plays. I mean, I don't blame him. He never plays. He got a shot to score. But listen, they didn't even try and score in the fourth quarter. They didn't even attempt to. And you go back and look at all the games they played.
But why, Bruce, why is that? I mean, every time you see somebody else try and score and they have a lead like that, you start saying that's the only way you can lose the game is by continue trying to score, and that Tillman sort of figured this out, that they're unbeatable when you play the way he did down the stretch in that game.
Because let me tell you something. He is a classic coach, a classic guy, unlike a guy who lost on Saturday, a guy who he gave more credit to Syracuse than Gate gave to Maryland. And Syracuse got pummeled. And I only wish one thing. I only wish Joey Spallini was on Maryland, because he would Tillman have found a way to make him a fight for first team All-America and for Torrington, Tony, he would have. He would have found a way to utilize that talent. Gate hasn't been able to. Okay.
Wayne, let me bring up one issue about depth, because we're going to hear it a lot. Luckily, we're going to be in the stadium, so we're not going to hear the chatterboxes on ESPN, right? You're gonna hear a lot about depth, blah 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 blah. It's like a talking point from 7 years ago that just it's like a zombie, it never dies. Maryland's offense is hyper efficient. They run, but there's this talking point from when Maryland beat Syracuse in 2011 in the infamous no shot clock game, the 6-5 game.
Oh, you should have heard Syracuse brought that up last night. That Tillman played stall ball the whole game yesterday.
So here's something to consider about the depth. I counted this. Cornell played 24 guys against Penn State. In the NCAA tournament, you can dress 40, but you can only play 32, which is just such a stupid rule.
And you have to announce the 32.
Yeah, you got to announce the 32 a day prior. It's just a dumb rule, but whatever. Maryland fielded 31 players in that game against Syracuse. Cornell fielded 24, right? Because they were in a much tougher game.
Right.
So if there's a depth issue on Monday and people get physical fatigue happening on Monday, it's probably not going to be Maryland. If Cornell wins the game, it's because Cornell dominated possessions at the faceoff and their offense got going, right? But if Maryland gets to 50% at the faceoff, if they get to 50% in goal, Maryland's going to win the game.
All right. You think another 10 save performance in his actually final game for Maryland?
I think so. 15 on the season, 5 in a row. I looked it up today. Over the 3 NCAA tournament games he's played so far, his save percentage is just under 70% this tournament. So in these 3 games this tournament, he's just under 70%. He's made 35 saves.
Look, it's a game. You never know what happens in a game. Cornell's goalie could stand on his head like Hardin Stoller did for Rutgers. Maryland lost the game. The goalie was unbelievable. The face-off guy can win 75% of the face-offs. We probably won't win the game. That's lacrosse. That stuff can happen. All right. Tillman Johnson back in 2008 or whatever year it was, took a team that was mediocre and won the title because nobody could score on them. So you'll know there are those arbitrary facts. But I'm saying man for man, plan for plan, position for position, Maryland to me is the better team. Cornell's a great team. You don't go 15-1 and not be a great team. But you're asking me my opinion, and I think I said it before Syracuse. I didn't say it with no conviction, okay? But lacrosse is a strange game, just like soccer is, just like ice hockey is. Sometimes the best team doesn't win. You get outperformed in the goal. You get outperformed, in the face-offs. But we're not getting out. Let me tell you, all right, our offense is the biggest kept secret that there is. All right, it really is. Why? You know why? Because it's unselfish. It's totally unselfish. And we get more juice goals than anybody, I think. I don't have that stat in front of me, but no, we haven't been getting them from the face-off guys. But AJ Larkin. Let me ask you a question, Wayne and Tony. Would you trade AJ Larkin right now for any other long stick midi in the game? How good is he going to be next year? How good is he going to be next year? And by the way, if something happens and we don't win it this year, we're going to win it next year, because next year we have a team that is beyond conception. And if we win it this year, it's going to be 2 in a row next year, because next year's team is not going to lose. Everybody hates Maryland.
I think that's a great place to close on this.
Everybody does. Nobody's rooting for us tomorrow except us and Maryland Terrapin Nation. Nobody. Right or wrong. Am I right or wrong, Tony? All right. Maybe a couple of the Big Tens are rooting for us and Kevin Warren's rooting for us, but that's about it. All right. And I'm not sure about the Big Ten either, but
no. All right. That'll do it. We will see everyone from the field in Foxborough tomorrow after the national championship. Good evening.